All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Irish Rewind. I'm Dalton, joined as always by George. George, how you doing tonight?
Great, and you, Dalton? Good to be back.
So first up, what do we have, George, on the docket? What's going on this week with Notre Dame?
Well, in the rewind, it was a crazy week for Notre Dame hockey. They played 3 games in 5 nights. um, they played some incredible games. They uh, they beat Michigan 5-2. On short rest, they ended up coming back on Friday, and they fell 2-1 to the
Wisconsin Badgers.
Wisconsin Badgers. And the next night, after probably a good talking to by Coach Jackson, they come back and they win 5-2. Some notable guys, Michael Graham, you'll hear him referenced through us as Golden Graham. He had 3 goals over those 5 days in those games. So, as a freshman, he's leading the team in scores in goals with 11. So,
Yeah, and he was named the Big Ten second star of the week this week, correct?
absolutely, Golden Graham, second star of the week in the Big Ten. So, big happenings here. This team is coming into their own. I had talked about a couple different scenarios with folks at work about how the Irish stay in the hunt for a decent seed in the Big Ten Conference tournament, and wouldn't you know it, the scenario played out minus the delivery of the Notre Dame first win on Friday night. Had they won Friday night, they would have set themselves up really nicely with the sweep. It would have ended up with a sweep, and it would have worked out a little bit better for them. But by not sweeping the weekend, the news is that the hockey team is on the bubble for the NCAA tournament right now. They currently sit at 16th in the rankings. So they need a sweep this weekend, and they need a sweep next weekend. It's not even. It's a must do. If they don't sweep the next 2 weekends, they're going to be toast.
They're on the road this weekend in Minnesota, right?
Minnesota. Minnesota was the team that beat Ohio State both games. So Notre Dame is sitting right behind them in third place. And a sweep this weekend would probably guarantee them sitting at second place in the Big Ten conference there. So it's a pretty good place to be if you're finding your game at this point in the season. It's a good time to be doing what you're doing.
Now, say that they don't make the NCAA tournament. How big of a blow is that for Notre Dame hockey after the couple recent years of success that they've had, George?
I don't think it's a blow. They got some prospects coming in. This is a very young team, and even in my discussions with some folks, they're happy with where this team has progressed to. So you always want to go out there and do your best and throw your freshmen out there, but with a team that has 8 or 9 freshmen on it, that's a young team. You could do your best and see how it plays out.
Well, moving right along, let's go to women's basketball for a brief moment. What was it, Monday? They played NC State, the number 9 team in the country, and really gave them a beatdown. Final score 95-72. What's the latest on that game, George?
Everybody played. The game was close. The game was close through the third quarter, and it got to the point where the game was actually tied at one point in the fourth quarter. And all of a sudden, you just saw this surge of offense from the Irish. Enrique is actually getting notarized on social media. She had this sick behind-the-back, no-look pass to Brianna Turner for 2 points, and it just lit up social media. So Arika's back to her old ways, and Mabry's doing what Mabry does, and that's making threes. And she was taking what the defense was giving her from NC State. And last night you had all your starters in double figures. Let's see.
4 of them over 15 points.
Yep. And Jessica Shepard and Jackie Young both had double-doubles.
Can we talk about how dominant Jessica Shepard is and no one seems to notice? I mean, you go through and you look at games, you can even just look at the box scores, and Shepard always seems to just put up big numbers.
People just can't stop her in the paint, Dalton. She's unstoppable in the paint, like Jackie Young. Jackie Young will drive to the basket to get points in the paint. Jessica Shepard, she's there for the pass, she's there for the layup, and she gets her points. And she cleans up the board. So Jessica Shepard, she's the other silent assassin on the team. She will rack up the points in a hurry if you don't get on her in the paint.
You could almost say she's like a Shepard for this team.
I like the Shepard for the team. I like that.
There's no shame in that.
We have a silent assassin and a Shepard. That's a combination.
No shame in that. I will 100% stand by that.
That's like me calling Michael Graham Golden Graham. So we both got our own.
Well, looking ahead, what do you see any challenges for this women's team in the regular season? Obviously, I don't want to jinx them like we did last time when they when they went out and lost to Miami after we talked about them. But they have Duke, Syracuse, and Virginia coming up before the regular season comes to a close. Do you see any issues with these last 3 games?
They all could be silent killers. Duke's not having a great season per se. Syracuse will be on the road, and then they come back home for the last game of the season against Virginia. You at this point, as I've had in different conversations with folks, you got to be tuning up for the ACC tournament. You got to be able to be bringing your A game, and the Irish are on a streak of scoring points in the 90s. They've had 3 games in a row where they've scored 95 or higher, actually. 97, 97, and 95. So and when you notice that they lost, they scored only 65. So when they're scoring more than 80 points, they're dominant. I'm even going back to Clemson, 101-63, 90-50. They lost 72-65. They won Florida State 97-70. Boston College 97-47 and 95-72. Those are impressive numbers in women's basketball. It's what it's reflecting is a team that's playing together and not looking at individuals to carry the team.
This might be absolutely crazy, but I think that if they struggle with any of these last 3 teams, I think it'll be Virginia. That's the last game of the year. It's at home. It's
senior
against
night.
A team who's not great, right? Senior night. And like you said, you have the conference tournament coming up in the postseason. It's really easy to overlook a team in that situation. I don't know that Notre Dame can possibly, lose that game, knock on wood. But I think that if they do struggle with any of these remaining opponents, it's going to be Virginia.
And that's a possibility. But with Oregon losing last night to Oregon State, there's a thing called the 4th spot open now in the polls. So if women want a number 1 seed, then what they need to do is they need to win out. Any loss along the way, they're going to fall below 6, in my opinion, and it's going to be really a risk of them being able to host a first round game, first 2 round games. So I think with a win on Thursday, Notre Dame moves into 4th place in the standings, and they need to play out to control their destiny and getting that number 1 seed in a region and being able to play a home game, 2 home games possibly, in the NCAA tournament.
Well, moving on from women's basketball, best of luck to them. We'll obviously follow them along throughout the postseason. Did you watch any baseball this previous weekend, George?
I didn't, but I did a lot of reading on it.
Well, you didn't miss much, my friend.
I know, unfortunately.
The Notre Dame baseball team traveled out west for a 3-game set with Arizona State. Not pretty at all. I mean, it was just, there's no other way to put it. By my count, they've scored 46 runs in 3 games against Notre Dame, which means they scored more runs, George, than they have broadcasts scheduled for Notre Dame baseball this year in 3 games. That's not an ideal way to start the season. I mean, one of those games, they scored 7 runs themselves, and they scored 5 in the finale. But you got to figure it out moving forward if you want to avoid a long season.
Well, and you can kind of look at it like you can look at it like basketball. If you lose some games early in the season, there's always time in the schedule to make it up. And the best part is that these are non-conference games right now, so they don't count. They don't hurt your rankings in your conference. They hurt you in the standings. But I guess that's why you got to kick the rust off, right? I mean, last year they came out and they beat LSU. They were ranked a fairly highly ranked team last year, and who saw that coming? So baseball is one of those weird sports that, yeah, you lost 3 games, but you can go on a streak and you can win 9 or 10 games. So that's all that you can hope for, because you're going to get a loss at some point down the road. But baseball is a long season, even at the college level.
Well, you're not wrong there, and hopefully they can turn it around. We'll keep a watchful eye throughout the season, and hopefully we have some really good news to report on as the season drags along. So I guess we'll wrap up here with the football portion of our show. Have you heard of Christian Story, George?
I have not heard of Christian Story. I've been really wrapped up with a couple other things. So,
according to 24/7 Sports, he's the 116th ranked athlete at a national level in the class of 2020. 3rd ranked prospect in the state of Alabama. Obviously, a lot of people think he's going to go play for the Crimson Tide. And it just came out from Irish Illustrated earlier today that he is now apparently strongly considering Notre Dame as a possibility. That would be a huge get for Notre Dame.
Oh, absolutely. Pulling a guy right out of Alabama. That's fabulous. That's to me sticking it to Nick Saban.
Well, and a good friend of mine from Blue and Gold Illustrated, Brian Drixel, he always talks about the notion that Notre Dame can't get elite players is overblown and silly. These players, they want to win and they want to get to the NFL. And as a college and as a program, if you show that you can do that, you have a really good chance of competing for these recruits. I think Notre Dame has absolutely done that over the last few years. You look at some of the guys who have went on to play at the NFL level. And, I mean, for goodness sakes, George, we were both there this year in the college football playoff. You can talk about what you want about the loss to Clemson. Look what Clemson did to Alabama. There is no shame at all in that loss.
Well, you got to remember, just this past draft season, I call it the draft season. I call it the time that the recruits pick the schools, and they draft the school that they want to play for 4 years, okay? We picked up Jay Bramlett right out of Tuscaloosa, punter. So it wouldn't be something that's unheard of. It would be great to do it 2 years in a row and see something come of it down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for as much heat as Brian Kelly and his staff get, I really like what he's doing, and I think that Notre Dame is moving in a really good direction. That looks promising, over the next several years. I think the early rankings came out for 2019, and if I'm not mistaken, Notre Dame's in the top 10. So, it looks to be another pretty good year out of South Bend.
The way too early rankings.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You have no idea. But the spring game is coming up before you know it. I think it's April 12th, if memory serves.
April 13th.
April 13th. All right. Well, memory doesn't serve me, apparently.
What would be awesome is to see some of these young guys that signed early, and that those guys are going to get some time. They'll put them out there on the field. They're going to want them to feel it's not going to be the real game day experience, but they're going to want to get those pads on, and they're going to want to be inside the stadium, running around the field.
Well, and I believe I mentioned it last week, but if I haven't already, pay attention to the name Jack Kaiser. The guy is a stud. I was able to cover him while he was at Pioneer for a couple of years. I think Jack Kaiser is going to make a big impact over the next several years for Notre Dame.
I think that we got a very good signing class. I think, as you said, I think Brian Polian and his staff are doing a really good job with the recruiting. I mean, come on, flying to Hawaii, and then going up the West Coast on the return trip to make sure you make the most of the time. These guys are in planes. When they're not on the field, they're out there on a plane, and they're hitting these kids and making sure that they got these commits. So I think the future's bright. I think that you're going to see this early signing day become more and more important than the actual one that happens in February. I mean, I think we had one or two guys that signed right in February, but everybody else basically, had committed, had pretty much had the early commitment back in December.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a quiet day that second time around because it was so busy the first time around, which is nice because guys are excited to, come to the program and help out.
Yeah. And so Isaiah Foskey really kept the folks waiting. They knew he was going to commit, but it was getting late in the day. And Foskey finally signed at some point that afternoon.
Well, to finish up here with a little bit of news at a national level that affected some former Notre Dame football players this week. George, did you hear the report about the Alliance of American Football? Apparently, there were rumors that they could not make payroll after week 1. Not a great start to an inaugural season.
Hey, where's my paycheck?
Yeah, so apparently, I believe it was The Athletic who reported this, that some of the agents were claiming that the league after week 1 could not make payroll and that they were supposed to be paid on Friday. Well, thankfully, they've been paid on Tuesday, according to the reports, thanks to the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, who apparently bought into the league for $250 million. It's being reported that he's going to be the new chair of the league. Not sure how that's going to affect the current CEO and co-founder, Charlie Ebersol, who happens to be a Notre Dame graduate, ironically. But, that's kind of a developing story. Ebersol has denied the fact that they did not have the money after week 1 to pay the players. And he said that it was a system glitch with a new administrator and that they at no point were financially unstable. So, thankfully, some of those former Notre Dame players should have their paychecks now. But not great news for a league that, started off pretty promising after week 1.
Well, as we kind of discussed going into this, I don't quite understand the business model. It's going to take a little more looking into on my part. But it's interesting that it's a league-funded paycheck versus an ownership of a team. the typically dot your I's, cross your T's type of thing would be like, I need to make sure that I got owners with a pocket that can pay these salaries, and But the interesting, it sounds just like a regular business. You got a president, you got a financial team, and then you got guys are getting paycheck from one spot, and it's kind of interesting that that we're talking about the league issuing checks versus owners of teams issuing checks.
Well, in the initial report that I read, there's some speculation that the owner of the Hurricanes is going to be rewarded an expansion team for his, small contribution of $250 million. What I found interesting was they said it could either be an expansion team or they might relocate one of the existing teams. George, can you imagine having a team come into your city for one season only to leave the next season and go somewhere else? I mean, that's something.
Is that kind of like the Cleveland Browns leaving for Baltimore, or the Colts leaving Baltimore to go to Indianapolis?
Well,
in the middle of the night. But the interesting, I will say this: if you're talking about the Carolina Hurricanes president, it would be great because they actually have some decent facilities right down there in Raleigh. Heck, I'm on a business trip. Guess what I'm going to go catch?
Right, no kidding.
I'm going to catch an AAF game.
Well, moral of the story to all the former Notre Dame players, we're glad you finally got your paychecks. All right. Well, as always, I've been your host, Dalton, joined by George. Thanks for joining us for, I believe this is our third episode now of Irish Rewind. We're trucking along, 97 more to go, George.
Hey, we're gonna have a party at 100.
Absolutely. Join us at Brothers right there on, what is that, North Eddy Street?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 1.5 pound burrito. I can't wait. So we will see you guys in 97 more weeks as well as next week. Thanks for listening and have a great weekend.
Go Irish.